Look at the cheeky smile and everything there. So, Mindaugas, can you share a little bit about your life in Lithuania and why you decided to leave at an early age?
Yeah, great question. So I think when I was maybe 12, my grandfather took me abroad for like the first trip, and you know, I'm 40 now, so I was born in like when we were under Soviet Union, and so that kind of opened up my eyes, I think, what it was like out in the outside world, and so yeah, that just kind of gave me this itch of wanting to live somewhere else and find different opportunities. So I think ever since I was like 12, 13, I had this idea even then. Once I'm 18, I'm out, like I want to be living abroad. And so I did that. I think when I was 19, I first moved to Galway, Ireland, and then the last 20 whatever years now living abroad.
Yeah. And so you can imagine as you move from city to city and around different places within Europe, that must have played a big part in your own character. Was there any kind of resilience or any sort of traits that you grew stronger within yourself from leaving at such an early age and going out and exploring the wonderful place of Europe?
Yeah, I think I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day, and we were talking about like how in our 20s we would, you know, back then you had to walk the streets if you wanted to like find a job, right? And I remember in Galway, when I arrived, I knew like a couple of people, and I just remember one day I printed out 30 CVs, I think, and I kind of set a goal, like I'm not going home until I hand them all out, right? And so you like those kind of things, and actually through doing that, right, you're interacting with people and you meet different kind of people. And so then what that, I think over years, what that built up was I can like now arrive in any city with probably zero money, and very quickly you learn how to survive. And you do that through knowing that if I go and meet the right people, and you have to go and put yourself kind of out there, you're going to be fine, because somebody will say so-and-so is hiring, so-and-so has like a spare couch or whatever, right? And you end up learning how to navigate those things. And so I think that's the biggest thing I learned, but also now that I really think about is because what we do is community. You understand the true power of community, really.
You can see that, right? You can see that as you land into different cities, and your commodity is not finance, your commodity is building relationships and building new people, new friendships, and so on. How did that strengthen your own career path, or did you see a jump as you're moving from place to place, or the friendships that were born along the way?
Yeah, I think you learn that you learn how to build relationships quickly, but also I think you learn quickly that they cannot be transactional.
Were there any dark times along the way?
Many, for sure. There was a lot. I think when I moved to because when I left Lithuania initially, I'd gone to like university for a year. I realized it wasn't for me, and then when I moved to Ireland, I just kind of started working in like the Irish version of McDonald's, right? And I fell into this world of making terrible money. When I moved to the Canary Islands, very much holiday industry, tourism, right? And so what that does is you are paid to basically get drunk every night, and it's like easy to fall into that life. And I remember, you know, for 10 years I was basically like lost. You know, we couldn't see, every day was just like making 3-4 euros an hour, getting drunk at work, going out, waking up, doing the same thing. But there was a moment I remember, I worked in this restaurant, and there was a manager that I worked with, and he was maybe like 60s or something at the time. And I remember one morning I came in to open up the restaurant at around 10. He came in at about 11. And the first thing he did is in the morning, he poured himself a small beer. And I remember that moment, like it's just etched in my brain, because that is the moment I was like, that's going to be me. If I don't change, that's going to be me in 20, 30, 40 years time. And I don't want that. And so from there, kind of took a few years to navigate that. But yeah, that was kind of a big one.
I think that's probably one of the strongest points as well, is to figure out, well, first of all, you recognize it, but then second of all, that wasn't what you wanted. What did you want, and how did you come about, accomplishing a step-by-step approach of getting to where you are now?
Yeah, so that very moment also, what made it so kind of really life-changing for me was because up until that point, a lot of people, so I'd been working in restaurants and I really enjoyed it. I was always a waiter, but all of my customers used to always tell me, you're so amazing at what you do, you should open your own place. And I never used to listen to that. And so that moment also, I was like, you know what? All those years of hearing that had come back, and I was like, well, maybe I should listen, because it's not just one random person saying that, right? And so I kind of started setting about, okay, well, maybe I'll try and open my own restaurant. And so I did that. I had like a couple of thousand saved up, and I got a kitchen, at least a kitchen within this kind of bar and restaurant. And I knew it was going to be a failure from the beginning, because you cannot open a restaurant with 2,000. But it was a great test in terms of, was I crazy in thinking about how good I was, or my service, or my food, and all of that. And it lasted for about 3 months. And actually we closed not because we couldn't make it work. It was another crazy story that I'll save for another day. But that kind of then put me on a path, okay, my ideas work. And so then I started thinking about more realistically, well, how do I get enough money to open this properly, right? Because the one thing I remember, was that in order to make it in that world, if you open something, you ideally need to have about a year and a half's money in the bank. Mm-hmm. Because at first you should assume nobody's going to come. And sure, Fridays, Saturdays in a lot of places will be busy. There's a lot more clientele. But until your Monday is fully booked, until your Tuesday is fully booked every week, you haven't made it. And that could take a year to 2 years. And so I kind of had that goal. And I think one thing I realized eventually was that I would never make enough money to open a restaurant while working in one. And so,
powerful, eh?
And so I decided to, at that point, move to Dublin, because I lived on a tiny island. It was just hospitality industry, tourism, so there weren't many opportunities. So I decided to move to Dublin, and the crazy idea I had in my head at that time was, I know what I'll do. You know who has a lot of money? Entrepreneurs. And I was like, I'll start a company. I'll move to Dublin, I'll start a company. No idea didn't even have an idea what that business could be. But that's just what I had in my head, that if I start a business, I will make the money and then I'll open my restaurant. Couldn't be further from the truth. But that's the thing that kind of forced me to move to Dublin and start from scratch, basically.
Okay, so we have so much to unpack there. So you've now moved from the Canaries to Dublin, and you have landed into Dublin. And what is your first thing to do? Well, like, did you chase the entrepreneurs? Did you come up with an idea, or where did the bridge happen?
No, I mean, that was never a reasonable thing to start, because I think I had like €800 on me arriving in Dublin. And so me and my girlfriend lived at her sister's house in their spare bedroom. I went back to doing the thing that I knew, which was restaurants. And I remember, again, walked the streets of Dublin, just handing out my CVs. And the crazy thing was, I had all this experience, years of experience in the industry, up to like managing really great restaurants in the Canaries. Nobody cared, because it wasn't from Dublin. The best I was offered was I think it was like €8 an hour waiter job in the hotel that Bono owns, Coho owns, the Clarence. Yeah, but I was doing, I did what I had to do, right? I was like, how do we quickly get out of this bedroom? I just worked as many hours as I could, overtime, whatever. And I think in about 3 months, we found an apartment. Then I went, I had done some sales previously. So I just hit up my old boss in the UK. He then introduced me to the folks in Dublin. I ended up getting a job selling office supplies and furniture. So it was like a strategic step-by-step plan that I had. So it was like, get the money to get out of this bedroom into a more comfortable place. Then how do you break out of hospitality, go back to something else, sales. Then went back to recruitment. That's when I discovered design. That's when I discovered community and design community. And the rest is history.
Do you think that there is, even to go back to when you're working in these restaurants and so on, and it's a fast pace, on your feet, really tough job in a lot of respects physically? When you meet the other people that are in that job with you, the hours that you work and so on, that the team or the community that's in each of these different restaurants and so on kind of carry everyone forward and to the end of the shift and so on. Do you think that that plays anything into what you're doing now and how 100%. You're building Coho?
I wouldn't be able to do, especially the last few months, the spin out and how we became a company. All of these things have compounded over the years. There's absolutely no way I could do any of the madness of the last few months. Absolutely no way. And for the simple fact, I can tell you a quick story. When I worked in this Irish restaurant in the Canaries, it was quiet. It was winter season, and what used to happen is they could never predict how busy it would be, so they would bring on all of the staff. But then, as they would see, okay, not many customers are coming in, they would send most home early.
Right.
And so that happened one night, and it was just a couple of us left. And all of a sudden, a wedding of 200 people walked down the stairs. And we all, I think 2-3 of us that were left, we all just looked at each other and we went, let's go.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
And I mean, honestly, it's probably one of the most intense experiences of my life, to the point where I basically cried in the back room afterwards, because the adrenaline rush to serve all those people. The kitchen completely collapsed. The manager completely collapsed. He couldn't deal with the pressure. So I was running the pass in the kitchen. I got the kitchen back to where it was while serving a section of about 100 people at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the intensity of that was just crazy.
But that has a huge impact, right? If you think about the bond that is born between those people that go through something in a way traumatic, that at the end of it, there is a relationship or a bond, I believe, that is born between those people that, we got through it, we made that happen and so on.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's fantastic. Okay, so then let's say you're back in Dublin, and from the restaurant world, we're then moving into recruitment and design. And what were the circumstances that kind of pointed you towards design?
Yeah, so I worked in this recruitment agency. I was just hiring kind of engineer, generic, right? Any role that was available. And then one of the colleagues who had the design desk, she'd asked me to help source a couple of designers. And I remember, again, it's one of those moments that's super etched into my brain, where I remember looking at a CV and there was a link, right, to somebody's portfolio. And I opened it, and I think the guy worked for Ryanair, maybe the designer. So it was a brand I recognized. And then reading through what a designer does blew my mind, because I didn't know that there was these teams of people kind of making all of these decisions on how I interact with a product or, an app or whatever. And I'm quite visual anyway. I like architecture, design. And so I just immediately fell in love with that, because I could understand and it was captivating. And so she happened to be leaving not long after. So I asked if I could take on the design desk. And there is a story I tell all the time. I mean, I was introduced or told about some folks who were, or designers who were kind of connected in Dublin in the design community. And I had tweeted a really bad job advert. And then one of those people picked it up and basically called me out. This was at the very beginning. What I did in that moment, I think, shaped how I ended up building community, was because when he did that, my initial thought was like, well, my design recruitment career is over before I even started, because he knew everybody. A bunch of people commented underneath. I had two options: sit in the corner and cry, or I found his number in the database, and I called him.
Nice.
And I said, you just tweeted about me. And there was like a long silence, and then he started laughing, and he goes, I can't believe you called me. And I'm like, well, look, clearly I, did something that you didn't appreciate, but I'm generally curious how I could do better. And just when I said that, he was like, oh, well, this guy wants to, understand. And so we ended up having a long conversation. And what that showed me was that as long as I don't pretend to be somebody I'm not, and like pretend I truly understand what a designer does. Like everybody used to get those outreaches from recruiters like, hey, we matched you with this job and you're perfect, and it has all these skills or whatever that are completely irrelevant. So I took a different approach where I would say, hey, I don't pretend to know what you do, but I really want to learn. And that started to open up all these doors and kind of creating all these relationships. Wow. And from there, that just showed me that if I just do that, the community will start building around me, and in exchange, I'll be a better recruiter. I'll be better at what I do.
Do you think that when you look back on that situation and ringing up the person, I think a lot of people would expect that story to go, you're ringing up the person to go and to call them out and to say, why did you post that? But your first reaction is, how can I do better? Or what did I get wrong here? Or, trying to figure out what you could do better yourself. How do you think that impacts now where you're building this amazing community, you're building Coho, your leadership skills, and how you bring that to the team that's there, but also to the overall communities that are being created within Coho itself? Yeah,
I think that has a big impact. Honestly, that same story that I just told you that happened in 2015 happened last week.
But it's a big thing, I've met a lot of different CEOs or kind of C-level execs, and predominantly a lot of them will tend to try to figure out how to push or encourage the team in a certain direction, but to take a step back and to say, I am a member of this team as much as anybody else is, and I'm going to fail, if not a lot more than everybody else is. And so please call me out on these things, and please tell me how I can do my role better, stronger, and to push this entire team and company forward is a massive deal. And to recognize that in your career at that time, I think, is a testament to your own characteristics, right? Yeah,
and in a way that just kind of showed me at that time that as long as you're transparent, you say, you call yourself out, you admit it, and you say it out loud, it works. Most people will resonate with that the right way. Yeah. And so it just changes how you operate on a day-to-day basis with your team, customers. And I even, I told the team at the beginning when we became Coho was that I'm always going to be a community builder at heart. And so the true role of a CEO, I will need to do at the beginning, but I also want to get myself to a place where I can still spend 50% of my time within the community. And if that's not an option, I don't want to do the job.
Which is crazy, right? Like if you think about your situation and put yourself in your mindset at the time, you have two roads that you can potentially go down here. There's one where you're in recruitment, which is honestly lucrative if you play the game well, and that's placing the right design or engineering or whatever candidates into the right roles. Or the other side of it is leaning into the whole community side of things and making sure that you're matching really strong candidates with the right company, both culturally and skill-based. It seems like you've taken the other path, whereas, financially sounds like such a North Star for you at that time, because, trying to get out of the living with your sister-in-law or all of that kind of side of things would be beneficial. Why do you think you went down the community route, or what do you see so beneficial in there?
I think it was, that's a good question. Honestly, just followed a path that just started appearing. It wasn't that, but when I now think about it, even like 20 years ago, I remember saying to myself, because I was always, as we talked about earlier, when you arrive in a new place and if your means of survival is building a community and relationships around you, I've been doing that for a long time. And I remember years ago thinking to myself, because what I would do, and I say this all the time, I'm quite introverted, and usually in group conversations, I'm the person that's like standing back and listening to what everybody's talking. And I'll hear people saying like, oh, I have this problem. I have this problem. And then in my mind, because I know so many people, I'll be like, oh, I should introduce you to so-and-so. So I've always been doing that.
It's always happening with you.
Right? And so, I mean, it just happened earlier, right?
Over 3 times.
3 times in a couple minutes. I remember thinking to myself, could that be a job? Like 20 years ago. And so I think even back then, you set this kind of weird thing in the back of your head where you then allows you to find or see opportunities that you otherwise would be maybe close to.
Yeah.
And so that really then accelerated when I started going into recruitment and discovering design. And through my work, and in Dublin at that time, I remember the community was not very big, it was growing, but there was all these different pockets of like 10, 20 people that were not connected with each other. But guess what? I was talking to them all. And so one group of 10 and another group of 10 that I've been talking to, I met for whatever drinks or an event, now becomes a group of 20. Yeah. And then I saw the power that, hey, if like the community is bought into what I do, I'm much more successful in my job. But how I started veering away from the recruitment was, the thing I enjoyed the most was not necessarily helping these people get the jobs, but all the other conversations that I was having as a result of that. So as a result of me being a recruiter or becoming known in Dublin, others would come to me and say, like more junior folks who were trying to break into, say, the industry. Mm-hmm. They would say, hey, I just graduated and I was told that like I'm promised land of design, I'm going to be making $100,000 a year and I can't find a job, right? And so I would meet them and I would kind of help them break in. And those were the things that I really enjoyed, seeing that progress.
Yeah.
And then when I joined Envision, that exploded even more because now I had access to designers of all levels across any company around the world. And talking to all of them, I started picking up these patterns, which was one, for early stage folks, breaking into the industry is hard, but there are a lot of resources. Then the role itself is quite linear, let's say, from like junior to senior, you're focused on your craft. And there's a lot of resources around craft. What I found very strange was that when you get into senior and above, the career paths become a lot more ambiguous and the resources start drying up. And I just picked that up. I said, hey, what if we gathered like a group of, say, 100, and it's crazy because it's the what we do now, of similar stage, more senior designers, maybe like senior lead manager level. Mm-hmm. And we did like a week-long camp nearly, where we surrounded them with all these resources and peers and experts. Yeah. On the topics that they're lacking on. It just stuck in my head and I didn't have the money to get something off the ground. So when I came across On Deck initially, of course I immediately got the model because that's what it was. It was just for founders. And so straight away I was like, I have to do this.
Is there any cases that you've seen from On Deck or even within Envision itself where you've seen somebody really grow in both their personal and professional lives through actions like this, where it's not just skill-based learning, but it's also all of the aspects of learning placed around it and the community aspect too?
I think Uche, who was here earlier, is an example that comes to mind. Obviously, we focused on more senior folks in the community, right? And for like Uche was way too junior for what we were targeting. I remember meeting him and he was so impressive. And he was telling me, I have these goals. I want to like move to London. I want to do an internship at Facebook, and then hopefully they'll convert me to like full time. Feel maybe awkward because you may feel like you're not able to contribute in the conversations because they're too far removed. But I feel you're so impressive that if you can just soak up all of that knowledge, you're gonna do what you're trying to do. What did he say he was doing? Working at Meta. Yeah. And so he did that. He got the internship, which is tiny percentage of people that get accepted to that, and then a tinier percentage get converted to full time. And I always think about that. Like
it's huge. I think one of the biggest benefits that I've ever seen, and knowing you for a decade plus, is that you have this crazy ability to see the best in people, in what they can become, but then this capability of nurturing a community where the entire community nurtures that talent out of that person and helps them to achieve major things that they didn't even comprehend themselves at that age or in the infancy. And you look at Coho. Coho to me is really just placing a label on what you have created there. I think you've been creating it for many, many years prior to it being Coho at all. But it is this capability for people to feel safe and trusted within that environment, to feel that they can open up and also accelerate both in a professional and personal respect, and to kind of really push themselves into the next challenge in their career, which is unbelievable. But if you look at where you were in On Deck, how did we then jump from On Deck and what was being created there into Coho, and what did that leap look like?
I built the design fellowship at On Deck. I saw, like, it was 2 years. I immediately looked at this as a multi-year project. If you're the face, that means as soon as you leave, the thing falls apart. And that didn't work for me, because I saw that and I was like, well, I want this thing to be around in 10 years time, in 20 years time. And hey, I'm not gonna be here for that long, probably, as an employee anyway. And so I kind of immediately set about to like kind of removing myself in many different ways from being the face of it and trying to build some longevity into it. We definitely saw flashes of the examples of what it can do, but not for everybody. And that again did not sit right with me. And I mean, last summer, as you well know, you were one of the first people I think I called about this, was that an opportunity came up to separate some of these communities into a separate company and kind of build it at our own terms. And that was honestly something I wasn't going to pass up. As complex as it was, we're still kind of dealing with the outfall of the whole spin-out process. But essentially, it was two choices. Either those communities are shut down and we all lose our jobs, or we find a way how to take all of these communities and kind of rebuild them from under the hood into something else that can now maybe start showing some of the ideas or the thinking that I had when I initially, was building it On Deck.
It's amazing to see though, isn't it? Like the progression over your career to where you are now, and to see Coho growing the way that it is growing. What was it like when you jumped from On Deck and into Coho and kind of took the CEO seat and, really brought it to where it is now? Like, what is it? It started 9 months plus and growing at an exceptional rate, an amazing community. I hope you feel proud.
I do, but the work is not done yet. Nearly. It's like one major phase is over, and we can start like looking ahead a little bit. The transition was, I remember feeling, or the way I'll describe it in a simple way. I remember feeling very calm, but knowing that there was a crazy challenge ahead. But I felt really calm. What's wrong with me? Like, I should be nervous, like really scared about what I'm about to do, what I'm asking the team to do. As we talked about, the team said yes with zero context. But then I remember that all of these things that we talked about earlier have compounded into this moment. And like, I think if this would have happened like a year before, I would have crumbled. If it was like a year before, I would have crumbled on the insane amount of pressure that we had to deal with. But the team was the right team that said yes. And the way I often say it is, even if one of those people said no, I likely would not be sitting here right now talking to you. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
They had to be those people, given the challenges or the mountain we had to climb. But I remember feeling super calm, and now is the moment to do this.
When you look back now after everything that you have built and how the company currently sits, is there some standout stories that you have about Coho members who their career path has been transformed through the company that you have built?
Like, transparently, I never like talking about like complete transformation, right? It's not us. Like we're good at bringing the right people, like what you said, right? It's about bringing the right people together and then surrounding them, helping them fight each other. It's not us that is doing the transformation or whatever. I don't like that. But there's loads of kind of those kind of stories, like the one that springs to mind, like Giulio, who's a designer from a small town outside of Pisa in Italy. When I interviewed him, I've worked in the same company for 10 years, some small IT company. I live, I'm completely disconnected with whatever is happening in the tech world or whatever. And I'm 50, and so I have this thing, like, am I too old to kind of try and make this transition, and is this community gonna help me? And I was like, well, I can't say that you're gonna join and you're now gonna be working at, I don't know, Spotify, right? Why would I promise that? Mm-hmm. That's not a real, no one should promise that. But I had confidence that if I shared enough with him of the resources on how to utilize the community, he would probably have a lot more confidence in taking certain steps that he otherwise wouldn't. And that's what happened. So is his life completely transformed? I don't know, you'd have to ask him. But is he now working for, I think, an earlier stage startup in Germany, which he couldn't see himself doing so? Sure, he is. So there's, the word transformation has maybe different meanings depending on who you talk to. But did we kind of help him achieve some of those things, or at least give him the confidence? Because that was the biggest thing. Could I confidently say that he'll have the confidence to start taking certain steps that may work, may not work? I don't know. Sure.
Well, all I can do is kind of tip my hat to you and really, really respect all of the work that you're doing and the team is doing at Coho. I think it's absolutely needed for anybody to progress in their career and to really think about what the next chapter means for them and to meet some like-minded individuals. So I think it's only onwards and upwards for Coho.